Hello and welcome. I am Exit Light and this is my channel. If you're new here, I am having an issue with my voice. It's an issue with my lungs. If you're not new here and you've been around, you know that I have been struggling with pneumonia, which has got a grasp on me. So please excuse that. But I wanted to talk to you about something that happened to me while I was in the hospital for those 11 days. Okay, so sit down, get cuddly, grab something to drink, grab a blanket, and let's talk about haunted hospitals and the nurses' stories, shall we? So while I was in the hospital, I found my people. The nurses that I had never met before would start talking to me about scary experiences that they have in the hospital. They told me something we've already talked about on here before, but they reiterated it for us, that every room you're in a hospital has had multiple people die. They told me that some rooms are more frightening than others, that there are rooms where they won't go in by themselves. They'll take another nurse if the nurse call button goes off and they know there's no one in there. They hear crying from these rooms. They know there's no one in there, but of course it's their obligation to go and double check. Maybe a patient started walking around and ended up in the wrong room and just call the nurse's call button for help. They know that's probably not the case, but they have to go. And my room, they said, was one of the scariest rooms on that floor. So before we get started about that, I want to tell you about a nurse I met. She was a young nurse. She was telling me that she wants to be in the funeral business when she grows up, because her parents are in the funeral business and her mom is an embalmer. They're involved with funerals. So she was thinking about being a medical examiner. So these are conversations that came out without me really having to say much. But I did say to her something about the funeral home, and that, people think that they're haunted. And she said, absolutely 100% haunted. And I asked her something that we have talked about here many, many times. Why would a place where the person did not die, or maybe they did die there, or but they didn't live there, they didn't spend their life there, didn't seem to be connected to a place, why would they be connected to a funeral home? Why would they be connected to a hospital? She said that her belief and her family's belief is that the soul stays with the body for a while, which is a very common belief amongst many religions. Usually it's up to 30 days. In fact, my mother-in-law died this year, and my brother-in-law and husband very much believed that her soul would still be there after she died, so they spent several hours there. She said that she thinks that maybe if it's traumatic, the soul stays attached, can't let go, and it goes with the body, and then through whatever process the body is put through, even cremation, and therefore it sticks to possibly the funeral home or goes to the cemetery. She said that they have an apartment upstairs, and when her parents are working late, sometimes they stay there, and they hear what sounds like coffins being dragged across the floor. They hear people talking, they hear people crying, they hear screams. And And obviously, you go down and check. I had a very, very best friend who lived above a funeral home, and he was there as a night guard. And he said that it was terrifying, that it was his job to go find out if somebody was screaming downstairs or crying or moving around coffins, but 90% of the time he would not, because the other 10% of the time when he did, there was nothing there. And when he would wake up in the morning, everything was fine. There was nothing unusual. There was nothing touched. And she said the same thing, that they would find nothing, nobody, but they could see figures that looked like thin human beings, like wispy, that they saw dark shadows. They would catch things out of their eye, and they had to learn to basically ignore these type of things. But then she said she started working in the hospital, and she got connected with it again. She told me that she is very empathetic, which I explained to her that I too am very empathetic, but I try not to keep that on when I'm in a hospital, because it would be ding, ding, dinging all the time, and that's not conducive to healing. She even came to me and told me that there had been an extremely violent death of a patient, a very, very violent death, and I can't go into the details. But she said that she hoped they died in, quote, faith. She said, I hope they died in faith, which is interesting to me, considering the fact that she thought that sometimes the soul went with them. So perhaps she thought if they didn't die in faith, maybe that is why the soul went with them. I had nurses tell me that in my room, they would hear voices crying out the call button, and there would be nobody there. In fact, one particular nurse I had, if I called the call button at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, he would barely open the door and he'd say, yes, ma'am. Kind of like, are you trying to talk to me or not? And I found that interesting, but the most interesting part was that I lay on my side. And at the time, it was my right lung that was infected. It eventually moved to my left lung because, of course, why not share? And it's possibly now in both lungs. I have to go to the doctor. Yay. The point of the story is, I would lay on my side with my back facing the door, and every single night I was there. My husband slept there as well. And he would hear nurses come in and whatnot. And I would feel a hand rub on the right side of my back, the lung that was infected. I would feel it. Turn around and there was nobody there. I would feel a hand rub from the top of my shoulder, down my arm, over my hip, down my legs. And of course, this would be highly inappropriate if that was a nurse coming in at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and there was nobody there. And I was awake. I didn't sleep much in the hospital. Breathing is completely underrated, and it takes a lot. But I asked, is it possible for a nurse to come in and rub your back while you're sleeping? And they said, absolutely not. And so they were asking me, like, why do you think so? So I would tell them what I was experiencing. I also felt what felt like a young child sort of snuggle up to the back of me. It was not menacing. I have lived with many dark figures and apparitions, paranormal activity. And so I do know that the best possible thing is to not react as if that has frightened you, because it does something to a spirit. And I don't know if it frightens them or angers them, but they can be much more agitated than you. So I didn't say anything. Come to find out that one of the nurses there had lost her 10-year-old son there very recently in that hospital on that floor. And we talked about possibility that it was that child. I'm not going to talk about what room or how close or the relevance, because that is getting a little deeper than I want to for the families. But the fact that multiple people and I spoke about this and talked about how it could be this, and the fact that they believe that these things do happen and experience them there also, and that my room was particularly active for that type of paranormal activity. And like I said, I am very empathetic. I know when I walk into a hospital, I'm quite aware of when I walk into a hospital that it is a place that I'm sitting in, laying in, that somebody has died. And I don't know how many people. I don't know under which circumstances. And I don't want to. And I can turn that meter down. If I go to the Alamo, I turn that meter way up. I stick my fingers in the musket holes and I want to experience that that was intended to kill somebody. And I can feel the fear and the loss of hope, etc. That's not something I want to do in a hospital. So I wanted to share that with you, because I don't think that probably many other patients have had these conversations with their nurses, multiple nurses, in fact. I don't think it's something that nurses feel particularly comfortable sharing, yet they did with me, which I felt was pretty impressive. Empaths know an empath, maybe. So thank you for coming to my channel. I'm going to put my jewelry link up below. I have multiple pieces that I have coming to be put up. As many of you know, I am no longer monetized by YouTube. They punished me by taking away my monetization when I took a break for a few months for some mental health reasons. A lot of the things we talk about here are dark. And sometimes people go through dark things and it's not cohesive. So they took away my monetization and there's a whole bunch of hoops I have to get through. And I'm not even coming close. So Christmas is coming. Gifts are warranted. And if you would like to take a look through them, like I said, I have many more coming up. Unusual pieces that you're not going to find anywhere else. Made with bone, some of them. Precious stones. I'd appreciate it if you would go take a look. Thank you for coming to my channel, and good night.